Hello and welcome. Hi, I'm Dave, and this tutorial is part of a Learn React tutorial series. I will link to the full playlist in the description below. Today we're talking about controlled components, but that is a little misleading. The name can be confusing for beginners. Controlled components refer to inputs in React forms. Forms in React are handled just a little differently, and the inputs are controlled. We try to use one source of truth for the state, and we'll get to that in just a moment. I want to go back and do just a little bit of setup and cleanup from the previous tutorial that we had on props and on lists and keys. If we look at the package.json for the project we've been working on, which is the grocery list I'm running here on the right in Chrome, we can see the dependencies listed. But when we installed the React icons dependencies back in the list and keys tutorial, I accidentally installed those as a dev dependency. So we need to move those. You can go to the terminal and choose a new terminal, or like me in Windows, you can press Control and the backtick to open up a terminal as well. So we're going to continue to keep the React icons. We just need to move them to being a production dependency. I'm going to open a new terminal because I'm already running React in one terminal. And here I'm going to type npm I and then react-icons, then --save-prod, and this will move it to a production dependency instead of being a dev dependency. I'm going to press enter, and with that finished, I'll go ahead and close the terminal window, and now you can see our dev dependencies are empty, and when we scroll up in the package.json, React icons are listed under the regular dependencies for production, and that's where we need them. Of course, we're running dev over here as we develop, and so it didn't impact what we were doing. I just wanted to correct that. Also, from the props tutorial, we went ahead and in the item list, we're adding the key as we should for each line item right here. But because I pasted in the list items into the line item component, we had previously had the key here. Again, it didn't keep anything from running, it didn't cause an error, but in the line item component, you can remove the key attribute from the list item element here. And that is because we already have it for the line item component right here inside of the item list component. And this is where we map through and list each line item. So with those changes saved, we are ready to move on towards controlled inputs. I'm going to go ahead and click on the app.js, and again, our application is running here on the right in Chrome, and we have a grocery list. We can check items, and we can even delete items. We're still using a default state, so when we reload, we get everything back. And the main reason we're still using a default state instead of pulling those items in from local storage, where we have been updating them after we also update the state. The main reason for that is because if we did that, we have no way to add a new item. We could delete them, but we couldn't add them back. So we need to add a form to add our new items. And we'll do that with a new component called addItem. So in the file tree, we can click the new file icon and create add with a capital A, item with a capital I.js. And we're using the React snippets extension that I have also linked to in the description and shown in previous tutorials. If I press the Control key, the Alt key, and the letter R at the same time, we can type _RAFCE and press enter, and we get our addItem functional component. Now we just need to turn this into a form instead of a div. So we'll change this to a form element. And let's go ahead and give this a class name attribute, and we'll set this equal to add form with a capital F. Now inside the form, we're going to have a label attribute, and here we'll have an HTML4 attribute with a capital F. And that's because we can't use the regular for attribute like we would in HTML. For is a reserved word in JavaScript. And remember, all of JSX is a JavaScript, or is JavaScript. So here we'll set for to add item, And after that, we're going to go ahead and add the label here, and we'll also say addItem. We'll probably hide this label off the screen, but screen readers would still be able to read it, and you always want to have a label for every input on your form. Now for the input, I'm going to put each attribute on a separate line, and we'll start with autofocus. Make sure the F is capitalized in autofocus. And then we'll have an ID, and I'll set this equal to addItem. After the ID, we'll set the type equal to text. And after the type, we'll have placeholder. We'll once again say addItem. If I could spell item, it would help. After that, we'll make this a required input, and then we'll wait on the rest. We will come back and add a couple of extra things in just a little bit. We're also going to have a button, and I'll also put these attributes on separate lines. The type is submit, which should be the default type when it's the only button in the form, but I'll go ahead and explicitly say that. And then we'll add an ARIA label. ARIA label is one of the few attributes that even in JSX still has the hyphen instead of using camel case. And here we'll say addItem as well. And that's because we're going to use an icon instead of using lettering or words on the actual button itself. We'll close the button, and there we have the closing button tag as well. But now we need to go ahead and import that icon from React Icons at the top so we can use it on the button. So we're going to import F with a lowercase a plus with a capital P. That means Font Awesome Plus. This will be from React Icons /FA. Put a semicolon and go ahead and save that, but we need to put the FA plus icon inside the button as well. With that complete, we can see we are exporting the addItem component at the bottom. So let's go back to the app.js, and just underneath the header, let's import our addItem component from ./addItem. We can save that, and let's add it to our JSX below. Just underneath the header, we'll add our addItem component. We'll save, and it should show up, and it does, and it is ugly right now. It is not styled at all, but there it all is. So now I'm going to put in some CSS to go ahead and add the styling. We're keeping all of the CSS in the index.css that you see here in the file tree. And again, it is not the driest because I did create the CSS on a per component basis. So you could actually pull all of this CSS out and create separate files for each component if you wanted to. Now I'm going to link to the full source code in the description below so you can copy these styles out, but I'll quickly go over it. Here's the form, and it is a display of flex, and so that gives us a little bit of control there. Besides that, it just has margin, padding, and border. I've taken the label and set it way off screen so screen readers can still use it, but we won't see it. The import or the input in the form has a flex grow style of 1, so it can grow and fill out the space we expect it to. Other than that, inputs don't get all of the font styling and sizing that the other elements on the page do. So I go ahead and add some of that here as well, along with border radius. We've got a button here, again, padding, border radius, minimum size 48 pixels high and a minimum width of 48 pixels. And that's because that is thumb or finger size. You don't usually ever want to go smaller than 48 by 48. Cursor is a pointer. We've even got some focus and hover styles, but nothing too unusual. I'll save that, and we should see the changes. And now our addItem input is nice and big. We've got a submit button that turns green when we hover over it, and it's ready to go as well. Now, to make this a controlled input, we need to tie it to state. We want to have one source of truth for the input, and we want to change the state as the input changes as well. So back in the app.js, I'll scroll up here, and we have our default state here for items and set items. So just underneath that, I'm going to define new item and set new item. And of course, this will also use state. And I'll just set that to empty quotes inside. So it will be blank to start out with. We can save that. And I'm going to go ahead and press Control B as in boy to hide the file tree for a moment so we can see more code. And then I'll scroll up because we also need to define a handleSubmit function that is going to handle the submission of the new item. So we'll call this handleSubmit. Now this function is going to receive the event object. And right now inside here, I'm just going to go ahead and log and we'll say submitted. And once we've saved that, we need to pass our new state and the set new state, new item, set new item, and handleSubmit. We need to pass all of those down as props to addItem. So with that said, let's go ahead and do that. We'll have new item equals new item. After that, we'll have set new item equals set new item. And then we'll have handleSubmit equals handleSubmit. We can save that. Now I'm going to press Control B to show the file tree once again, go to the addItem component, and here we need to destructure these props as they come in to the component. So we had new item, set new item, and handleSubmit. I'll save that and press Control B to hide that file tree again. And now let's make the input a controlled input or controlled component to be accurate. We're going to do that by setting the state to be the one source of truth for this input. And we can do that with a value attribute. And here we'll just put in the state, so it's new item. But if we just left it at that, we wouldn't even be able to change the state at all or change the new item. So we also need an onChange. And here we're going to actually pass in the event object. And after we pass in the event object, we need the equals to create an arrow. We're going to call set new item. And here we'll have event.target.value. So now as we type in this field, it will set the new state for new item, and that will be represented there as well. So not only because we typed it, but that would be the state. So I guess I could set another place to display the state, or we could just look at the state in the dev tool. So I think that's what we'll do. Let me right click and choose inspect. And now with DevTools, I need to go to components, bring this up, and now let's find the addItem component, and we'll look at the state. Here it is. It's an empty string right now for new item, but we'll start typing here, and we have, let's say, STATE, and it catches up just a little bit behind my typing, but there is new item state right there. Or we could say we're shopping for pizza, and now there is our new state right there in the DevTools, and I'm using React DevTools to show the components. Again, a link in the description for those. But we see the state update automatically. Now, does this update our list? No, we still need to handle the submit, but we are handling, or we're linking to one source of truth for this input. It is now a controlled input. I'm going to get out of React DevTools and come back to the elements in DevTools for just a moment. So you can see these elements here, and of course as I mouse over things change, but really this is still an HTML form. And as you may know, when you submit an HTML form, it reloads the page. And I believe I've saved this file. So just to verify this, when I press enter, oh, and I made it required, so it says please fill out this field. Okay, I'll type in pizza and press enter. And you see the elements flash here? Watch the elements section of DevTools. I'm going to do that again. I press pizza, press enter, and it reloads the page. We want to prevent that behavior, and we can do that by preventing the default behavior of the submit event, but we're not going to do that right here on the submit because we need to call the handleSubmit function that we have passed in. You may see some actually explicitly pass in the event with an arrow function like this, and then they're calling handleSubmit inside and passing in the event like that. But you don't really need to do that. The event is implicitly passed without you explicitly showing that it is. So handleSubmit here will still receive the event, and we can work with it as we define the function. So I'm going to save this since we've passed handleSubmit into the onSubmit listener here for the form. And now we'll go back to app.js and we can define this function. Right now, it has a console log submitted. Let's go to the console and let's go ahead and type in pizza, and it's flashed submitted, but then because of the page reload, we didn't see the word submitted. So we need to stop that page reload first. And we can do that by taking the event and then put a dot and put prevent default and call that first in the handleSubmit function, and then we should be able to see the submitted and it won't reload the page. So now if I type pizza, we get submitted in the console. Pizza is still here because the page did not reload. Because we used the required attribute in the input, we really should not get a blank value submitted, but we can check for that to say if we do not have a new item. In other words, if it's undefined or false, then we can just return and exit this function altogether. After that, we do want to call an addItem function that we'll define. And from there, we're going to set the new item, and we will reset the new item to empty as it was before, because we don't want to continue to have the pizza there. So now let's go ahead and reload and try this again. We won't see the submitted since I removed that. But if I put pizza and then we press enter, it submits, and then the state is set back to empty, so we don't still have pizza there. To verify that we're receiving pizza, we could go ahead and log the state here before we define the new item, and then, or before we define the addItem function, and then we'll know we are receiving that. So let's go ahead and save that, and now we'll try again. I'll type in pizza, press enter, it disappears there, but we did get pizza in the console. And this long line here is kind of making pizza wrap, but we do see it. Now let's go ahead and remove that console statement, but we need to define the addItem function so we can call it in our handleSubmit. We'll scroll up above the handle check and handle delete, and we will add item right here. So const addItem, and this is going to receive an item, of course, whatever the new item is. And inside here, we need to think about how we're constructing this item. And we can see items have an ID, and then they have a checked value, and then the item itself. So ID is the first thing to concern ourselves with. And how do we increment the item ID? Well, let's go ahead and write a little code that does that. We'll define the ID here, and let's set it equal to checking if the items, which is our state, our list, length. So if we have length, if it's not 0 is essentially what we're saying. I'm going to press Control B again to give us some more room and hide that file tree. And this is a ternary statement. So if there are items in our list, our current state, then we'll look at the items and we pass the items.length -1, and by referring to that, this should be the last item in the list. Remember, length starts at 1 and tells us how many items, but when we're looking at the position of an array, it starts at 0. So we always have to take the length -1, and there we'll get the ID of the last item, and then we'll add 1 to it. So that increments the ID by 1, and that can be the new value. However, if items has no length, that means it should be 0, and then we just need the item ID to be 1. So there is our ternary statement that sets the ID value. And now let's define this new item. And maybe we should call this, because we're also working with a new item state, let's call this my new item, just to make it a little more clear that we're working with something differently. And this will be an object. So we have the ID. Checked will always be false when it starts. And then we're going to have the item that's passed in. And there is our object for my new item. Now we need to create that new array to update the state with. So we'll call this list items and set this equal to, and now we'll use spread operator here for items. And then we'll also have my new item at the very end. And that is our new list. And then we can just update the state. Now, when we do that, it's just like the handle check and handle delete functions. And notice this function, handle check and handle delete, both have the same lines at the end, the last two lines. And I've copied those and we can paste those in here. But that's not very dry, is it? Because we're repeating these same two lines in every function. It would make much more sense if we just broke those out and created a function that we could call every time. So let's do that. I'm going to copy those, and just above we'll create a function and we'll call this setAndSaveItems. And then we're going to pass in the new items. And now let's just put those two lines right there, but here instead of list items, we'll just have new items, and we'll change the same thing here. And then in the rest of these, we can, instead of saying set items, we can say set and save items, and then we can just remove the local storage line altogether, and we'll just take this one line here and replace the last two in each of these functions. I can actually select them both and paste in and save, and there we go. Now we set and save items at the end of each one of these functions instead of having those two lines that were identical in every function. Now let's go ahead and scroll back down to our handleSubmit where we're ready to actually call the addItem function, and we'll do that with the new item state and save, and we should be ready to add new items to our list. I'm going to clear out the console and reload just to see if we have any other warnings or errors, but no, everything looks like it's handled all right now. Let's try to add some new items to our shopping list, and I'm going to add pizza. And it works. That's great. So let's add almonds and chips. Yes, and we're getting our new items. And now if we delete an item, it still works. It's all good. We could add milk to our list. Everything seems fine, but right now we're still using that default state. So when I reload, we're back to these same values. But now that we can add new items, let's go ahead and start loading from the local storage and remove this default state. Now, if we scroll up, we can see when we save, we use JSON stringify with local storage to set that item. We need to go ahead and remove this default state now, and we want to pull the values out of the local storage that we have saved. So let's start out with json.parse, and then we'll have local storage.getItem, and then we can specify the shopping list that we saved the items under in local storage. And we'll save that. And now we've got milk and bread, and that's what I had currently in the local storage under shopping list. So I can delete all of those now, and we're not worried about running out of items because we can add more items back in. So we can say pizza, milk, bread, and then we can say something like almonds, chocolate covered, unsalted, you know, the ones in the blue bag. And that works as well. So we can add as many items we want, we can check those, and we can remove ones, whatever we do. And then when we reload, that same state should come back in from the local storage. And it did. Right when we reloaded, I can do it again, and nothing's changed. The check item remained checked, the items that were here remained, and the items that we deleted are no more. Okay, let's go ahead and close DevTools. And while this is great, I want to implement one more form that will work just a little differently. And let's acknowledge that grocery lists can get very long. Maybe we're looking for a specific item in a longer list. So let's add a search to our grocery list, and we could add a few more items as well. And then we could just narrow down those items when we just want to pull up the one that we're looking for at that specific time. I'm going to press Control B once again to show the file tree over here, and we're going to add another new component, and we'll call this searchItem.js. Okay, our search item component is also a functional component, so we can press Control Alt and the letter R, and then type _RAFCE. And that gives us the outline of our functional component. This will also be a form, just like our last one was for addItem. So we'll type form first. Let's give this a class name, set it equal to search form. And now for the onSubmit, this will be just a little different than before. Let's press Control B to see more. Again, hide that file tree. Our onSubmit listener here is just going to handle that prevent default right away. So here we'll pass in the event and we'll say e.prevent default. And that way, when somebody presses enter, we won't even have a button for this form, but when somebody presses enter, it won't reload the page. So there is our prevent default with the onSubmit. From here, we can add a label. And inside the label, we'll have another HTML4, and we'll set that equal to, let's just call it search. And then on the label, we'll say search. And again, we'll probably hide this label off the screen, and we'll just use the input. Let's put the attributes for the input all on their own line. We'll have an ID equal to search, and a type is going to be equal to text. We're going to have a role for this. And that's because it's a search box, so that gives it the proper role as far as the HTML is concerned. Placeholder, we'll set this equal to search items, so we can search our list. And now the last two, once again, we won't put in right away. So let's just save this much. We don't even need a submit button for this form because it's going to handle the search just a little differently, whereas when we create a new item, we didn't want to add it to the list until we'd completed typing our item. But in this case, we want to start searching right away as soon as the user begins to type. Let's go back to the app.js. I can just click on it up here at the top. And we're once again going to set state. So we'll set search and set search, and we'll use state here as well. And we'll just once again set those to empty strings to start out with, or set it as an empty string to start out with. So we've got search and set search, and that's what we will want to pass to the new component. Oh, and we need to import that as well, right? So underneath the header, once again, we can say import search item from /search item. And after we've imported it, then we can add it to our JSX here. We'll add search item, and we're going to pass in the search is equal to search. And then we're also going to have the set search equal to set search. And after that, we should be able to close it out and save. Now once again, we see our search input and label up here in our application, but it is not styled. So I'm going to press Control B and go to the index.css and scroll down to the bottom of our index.css to paste in the new styles for this search box. Again, these styles can be broken out just like I had mentioned before per each component, so you could have separate files. So this will not seem as dry between the form styles. But once I save this, we can see our search items input spans the entire application here. We don't need a button because we're just going to be able to type, and we have linked that together. And if we look back in the search component, we still need to link it to our state that we have set, and we'll need to destructure that as well. So let's receive the search and the set search with the destructuring at the top of the component. And then inside of the input, we can set the value equal to the current state of search. And then we also want the on change. And now here's where we will pass in the event to an anonymous function, and then we will set the search, and we're going to set that equal to the event.target.value. And then I want to come back to the app because I believe I put these in the wrong order. So I want to put the search item, actually, I'll cut that out, and I'm going to put it underneath the addItem, and now save the app. And they've flipped roles, and yes, that's what I was picturing more, and that's spaced better the way I had set the margins. So the addItem is on top. Other than that, I didn't make another change there. But now being tied to the state, when we search, we could once again look at the components in the dev tools. And I will scroll up just a little bit. We'll pick components out of our React dev tools. Pick search item, and there we can see our search state. So when we type in PIZ, we will see that represented in the state below. We're just not filtering the list yet at this point, so we need to go ahead and put our search into action. But we are getting the search state now. And now that we have the search state, I'll go ahead and close the dev tools once again, and I'm going to press Control B to see more of the code. And now we can filter the items that are passed to the content component, and that will essentially apply what we type into our search box, and it will filter the items to that. So let's do this with the higher order function filter. So instead of just passing in the items, we want to pass in items.filter, and from there we're going to have an item. And now inside the filter, let's put two of the parentheses, and then we'll have item.item, which is the description, and that does need to be inside parentheses because we don't want to think this is another part of the object. So outside of that, then we can put two lowercase because we know we're working with strings in that field. And now let's close out that parentheses. So two lowercase, and then we want dot includes. And from there, we're going to say includes the search state, and I am wrapping the code to the next line, to lowercase also, because that would get it to match. So if we didn't put the two lowercase, then a capital M would not match the lowercase m. The capital P in pizza would not match the lowercase p. But I think it's better that we go ahead and just set everything to lowercase for the match. It won't change what we see on the application, or it won't change our state. This is just a conditional here. So if we go ahead and save that, now it already applied and it's showing pizza. And if we remove that search, now it shows everything again. Or if I type just B, we get bread. But there's also a lowercase b for blue and bag in this, so it narrowed it down to both. Now if I type BA, it should just match with bag. So we're filtering each one of these. Z is just in pizza, R, E, A, D is just in bread, or even just REA. So our search items box that filters the items we're passing to display in the list is also working. So just a quick recap on what we've done for our two controlled components today. addItem has the value equal to the state, and then on change, we set the state with e.target.value. And then it's very much the same with search item. We set the value equal to the state, and then on change, we once again set the new state to e.target.value. And that gives one source of truth for the input, and that is the state. And that's how you want to handle inputs in a form in React. Let's go back to the addItem.js, and there's one final addition I would like to make before we finish. Let's notice if we add something new here, and let's just say we're going to buy sushi at the grocery store, but instead of pressing enter, I click the button. Now notice the button still has focus because I have hover and focus style to change it to green. I click the button retained the focus. I'm not ready to type. If I type an A or a B, I'm not seeing anything here. And so we need to shift the focus back to the input. Now we can do that with a hook in React, and that hook is called useRef. So let's go ahead and import that hook, and we'll import that from React. And while there are some other cases for useRef, this is by far the most common use case for it. So let's just call this input ref, and let's set it equal to useRef. And after that, for our input, just after the autofocus, let's come down and give a ref attribute, and we'll set that equal to our input ref that we defined. Now we can save that, but that still doesn't fix our problem. We've applied the ref to the input now, and we've imported useRef to use, but we're still not setting the focus back to the addItem input yet after we click the button. Let's go ahead and do that in the button click event. So here we'll have onClick, set that equal to, and we'll use an anonymous function, and then inside that function we'll say input ref.current, because the ref always has the current property, so that's what you want to refer to, and then .focus. And now when the button is clicked, it will set the focus back to the input. So now if we put something else in here like crackers and click our button, we've got focus back here. That was only green because my cursor was still over it. So I'll do that again, and I'll move the cursor just a little faster. So let's say soda pop, and click the button and move away, and focus is already back where we want it to be. We've come a long way, and we've learned a lot about React while we've been completing our grocery list application, but there's much more to learn. Now we're going to take this to the next level in the near future, where we would be interacting with some data from a server, or on the back end, if you will, as React is front end development. So that is coming up in this series. Hey, thank you guys so much for liking the video if it helped you get started with React. Also, I appreciate you watching and subscribing. It's helping my channel grow. Take care, and I'll see you again very soon.